Rodney, I've been thinking about something lately. Exercise. Like,
Okay.
we don't talk about exercise enough, but I just love it. Like, do you ever do something and you just love it and you just want to do it all the time? I used to
Sleep.
hate exercise.
Did you?
Hated it, but I love
I
it.
love it. Yeah.
I love it. What do you do for exercise?
It changes daily. Do little circuits,
Mm.
30-minute circuits,
Hmm.
and some
I
soccer
think
and
that's the key,
basketball. What do
though.
you do?
Like, you got to find what works for you, right? Yeah, you just got to find what
What do
you
you do?
enjoy doing. I love to lift, so I lift, and I
Do
love
you
it.
skip leg day?
No, I actually love leg day.
Leg
I don't
day.
always love
Don't.
doing leg day, but I do love having done leg day.
That's kind of how I feel about workouts.
Yeah,
I don't love working out, but I love having worked out.
yeah. I'm starting to love them, like just being in it. I get some daily podcasts done during exercise time too, so it's good.
Mm.
It's a good time. Exercise.
Yes, well, bruh. Yo, I'm Rodney.
Hey, and I'm Keith, and this is the More in Common podcast. Welcome. This is a place for genuine, authentic conversation where we explore the fact that we have more in common than that which divides us.
Yeah, it is. Get out to our website, www.moreincommonpod.com, to check out all things More in Common. And before we jump into taking a look at last episode, we're just going to read a real quick iTunes review from Kim0628. Really close to my birthday.
And mine.
Indicating a birthday.
Yeah.
The comment says, thoughtful and inspiring. These conversations on this podcast are thoughtful and thought-provoking. Thank you, Kim0628. You're thoughtful and thought-provoking as well.
Seriously appreciate it.
Really
Very
do.
much so.
So let's go back and talk about the Patrick episode really quickly. Keith, what'd you take away from it?
Aside from so much, I try to narrow it down as much as I can to the things most impactful to me since. He tells a story about his friend and his friend wanting to go back to the country from which his parents escaped to build a better life here. And the perspectives, how Patrick says, I mean, I can see both of them. Like, they're both right. And I think about the 6, looking at the 6 and the 9 we talk about in the episode. Mm-hmm. And it's just such a great example of how often we can both be right. We just need to see the other person's perspective a little bit more clearly. And then just a small one. I love his perspective on millennials because we hear a lot of trash about them. And I think he just brings a really fun and insightful perspective on the positive of the generation. Mm-hmm. How about you?
The story he tells about the trip that they did to, I think, Mexico, maybe Tijuana, I don't remember.
Yep.
And there's a student who just doesn't seem like to really want to be there, dropping F-bombs all over the place. And that story where he had basically given up on this kid. Like, this kid was just like, he was just trouble. He didn't want to be there, and I had to manage him. And this kid came back and proved to him that experience changed his life. And it just goes to show that you don't know what effect you're having on somebody, and give everybody a chance. I mean, sometimes they'll prove that they're not worth it, but give everybody a chance. And also, something I just learned, these are really good shameless plugs for you to go back and listen to the last episode, because you're going to want to hear that story in full, because Patrick tells it way better than I do. So, Keith, introduce our guest for today.
Yeah, today we have Matt McCabe. Matt is a technical program manager and a serial entrepreneur with over 18 years of experience in a number of technical fields, as well as founding and growing businesses. He founded Ultimatum, but recently had to close up shop, though. There is for a lot of reasons, but we have a lot to learn from him in that endeavor, and we talk about it a lot in the conversation. So we just want to call that out. But Matt has an MS degree in computer information systems from St. Edward's University. He completed a BS in psychology from the University of Texas at Austin and an MA in psychology from the University of Pennsylvania. Pretty well-rounded guy, super ambitious, a lot of insight to share, and we're super excited to have him today. What do we talk about?
We talk about radical truth, building a company around values. We talk about the origins of Your Ultimatum, which is no longer around, so we may have to bring him back to talk about that whole thing. And we got into what led him to feel that that was his calling and what he's doing with his life. What strikes you about the conversation? What do you want to tip people off to?
Yeah, I think he talks about this and it's unique to his business, but I don't think it is. Like sometimes and this speaks to me and us as we build our enterprise, balancing the company mission that you're setting out to achieve versus personal ideals when they do conflict. Because sometimes they will. And he has a very explicit, not explicit, but a very poignant story around that. And it just causes one to think, regardless of what you're doing, when your macro and your micro conflict. So it's a really good conversation. I really enjoyed having Matt on and really hope you enjoy the show.
Where, I mean, you can still like enjoy your life, you can have fun, you can make money, and still be a good human being and still help other people. We will honor these values to the point of going out of business. So if we can't honor if it's a choice between violating one of our core principles or going out of business, we will go out of business. That's how important those are to us.
All right. Here we are once again, the crew's here, and we are joined by Matthew McCabe or McCabe?
McCabe.
McCabe.
Yep.
Got it right the first time. Thanks for joining us. Matthew from representing Your Ultimatum, joining us here today on this lovely Saturday. Appreciate you taking some time out to talk with us.
Yeah, it's good to meet you.
For sure. I'm excited to be here.
Right on.
So I am curious. So in Your Ultimatum, your organization, you have a series of values, which I love that you've outlined them for the organization, and it's just something more organizations need to think of, especially at startup. One of them is radical transparency and truth. And in it, you say, we speak and listen to the truth, especially when it is hard and not what we want to hear. So what are the core elements you implement as a team to allow for that? And when you say listen to the truth, what does that mean?
That is a really good question. So I think the truth is whatever is factually true, which can also be something as like intangible as this is how I'm feeling, because how I am feeling is, this thing
is true,
which is true. Yeah. So yeah, what is true is really, I guess what I'm getting at there is understanding where the other person is coming from, why it is they believe what they believe, and talking through it in it can be in a heated way, and it can be emotional, but being empathetic and respectful and understanding each other's points of view. And then, if it's a conflict, coming to some, conclusion about this is how we're going to move forward, and understand, that it's not going to affect your professional relationship or your friendship. And that's It's
what the second part of that in the act of truth, or the question about truth, because it's something common in our vernacular is I speak the truth, and often it is I speak my truth, right? Yeah, I only tell it the way it is, but I only tell it the way it is for me. And what that inherently does is it creates this dissonance with the other person when it's like, but that's not what I believe, or that's not what I see, or that's not what I feel. So I love the way you frame that up. And I had a feeling that's where it was going to go, but I think it's just a really, really important topic when we think about the safe space of conversation, especially in heated, like someone else's truth is vehemently their truth. Understanding it is something that we have to try to do a better job of. So I love that.
Yeah, and I think data and facts are an important part of that conversation, and frankly can help you help both of you to take a more objective point of view on, like, if it's something in a work environment where like something went wrong, and you have to talk through, do a retrospective or a postmortem and understand what went wrong, and just lay out the facts. I mean, I can feel one way about it, like, well, I think this is kind of what happened, but in the end, my opinion can change based upon what the facts and the data are. So I think you can start off a conversation of like, this is where I'm at, and this is how I'm feeling about this. And every person in the conversation can share that, because it's important to understand where you're coming from, but then actually look at the data and look at the facts, and then make a rational decision about how you're going to move forward. So I think when you do have the facts and the data, it is important to look at them. But if it's more of a conversation of like, you said something that upset me and hurt my feelings, and let's talk about it, then you don't necessarily like the fact is, or the data is, you said this thing, and here's how I reacted to it. So it's a little squishier, but you can still talk about the data and the facts in those kinds of conversations too.
No, that's a real cool way to look at that. We in the last week, I'm pretty sure Keith said the data doesn't matter, and not that it doesn't matter, but like in this, like when somebody's in a heated argument, or if somebody vehemently believes what they believe, doggedly believes, coming at them with numbers is probably not going to do anything. But what you said there, starting by just stating where I'm coming from, like I feel this about this, and just stating like, hey, I'm open to hearing your thoughts on it, but this is where I'm starting from, is I think a way to make the data more palatable.
And it's also, classifying the feeling. Like even a person who is vehemently on a track of something, regardless of data, like their feeling about it is a data point. Like and conceptually classifying that as data is a great way to, kind of get into the prefrontal cortex and think of it logically, and think of this as a rational circumstance of data versus irrational,
and to not ignore it. Like have you? I know a few people that are like, oh, my feelings don't play into it. I'm only factual. It's like, no, like everybody's feelings matter in how they view things. So if you just by acknowledging it, like, and calling it data for those people would probably be helpful. Like, just call it data. It's more information. That's dope. What about so your values? Like, what made you come up with what in that process made you anchor on creating some values, like for the company, for the organization? Like, where'd that come from?
I will try to give a shorter answer. That is something I could literally talk for like 2 hours on, because it's really rooted in my experiences working in tech. I have worked for some companies that have amazing cultures, one of the first companies I worked for was Whole Foods Market. I worked in the global headquarters in Austin, Texas. And at that time, John Mackey was starting to form his ideas about conscious capitalism, and how to build a great company culture that you can, as a company, you can make money, be successful, and also take care of your employees, take care of your customers, and also the environment and your suppliers. So you don't, if you hyper focus on just your customer, which I'm sure you can think of some companies that do that, you're going to you're going to create a toxic culture. You can be the most customer centric, amazing company out there, but if your employees hate working for you, then in the long run you're probably going to fail. It may be hard to see, and you might have a lot of success in the short term, but in the end, you're not going to do well as a company.
What I hear there is, real quick, when you say customer centric, because it's interesting because everybody's customer is different. Like if I'm a manager, my customer is my employee, in my opinion. This for me, Rodney speaking. But I when I hear a lot of companies say it, they're saying my customer, like the one paying us money. So what they're really saying is money is the right? They're really saying money is the key here. It's not really about my customer. It's about the person that's going to pay us.
Well, it's like if you're ever in a service industry and the restaurant says the customer's always right. And like as a server, that's the model, even if they're wrong, because they can be wrong.
Yeah. Like people are right.
It creates that conflict for the employee. And it's interesting parallel, though, both coming from technology, like culture, values. Like this is something that we have learned through our experience in the technology industry as super important because of our opposite experiences, if you will. And it can grow out of control. I mean, to your point, like where you're going right now, probably it can grow out of control. But sorry, continue.
Yeah. So having seen this, amazing culture that Whole Foods built, and not that I necessarily buy into this entire theory or philosophy of conscious capitalism. I think parts of it are interesting and right. I guess I'm a little more focused on how do you actually execute that versus like the theory of it. But that's me. I guess
you say amazing culture at Whole Foods before we go into, because I want to get into conscious capitalism as well.
Sure.
But what does that mean, or what did it mean for Whole Foods at that time?
At that time. This was some time ago, and
new ownership.
Yeah,
new ownership.
Exactly, which I feel really conflicted about. So what is an amazing culture? So it's a culture where the customer feels respected, they feel like they're getting good value, employees are happy, they're paid a living wage, they have medical benefits, they're able to support themselves, to live a healthy life, and work and enjoy what they do. Your producers, so the people you're actually buying from, feel like you're paying them a reasonable amount for the products that you're purchasing from them, and you're at least having a minimal, if not a positive, impact on the overall environment. So that can be our world in like a literal sense of the environment, but it can also be animal welfare, or making sure that you're offering healthy foods to people. Not that everything Whole Foods sells is healthy. Like just because it's organic doesn't mean it's not junk food. Which is, anyway, that's a whole nother topic.
Wait. So I can't just fill up my cart at Whole Foods with cookies and be Healthy.
Because they're organic, man.
Yeah,
It's organic wheat. It's organic sugar.
There were some like vegan, organic, amazing cookies at Whole Foods, and we would share them in the office. And then I realized, like, one day I found out they have like 1,000 calories in them, per cookie, and I'm like, oh my god! And it's like,
vegan desserts are usually pretty, well, at least in LA, pretty good tasting.
Yeah.
But the sugar content is out of, I mean, because
calories aren't vegan.
Yeah. So anyway, Wade, to get back to your question, I think just creating an environment that's positive, supportive of everyone who is a stakeholder, that's really what's key. And like, in my mind, that is creating a good company culture. And, you know, after I left Whole Foods and I worked for a few startups, you know, that some had good cultures, some not so much. And then I worked for Amazon. And, you know, frankly, Amazon taught me the antithesis of, you know, what a good company culture is. And, you know, that's when I realized how important it is to take care of everyone who's a stakeholder and not just the customers. So when we started Ultimatum, you know, one of the first exercises I did is just, you know, stream of consciousness, wrote some bullet points of like, this is what is important to me and the company that I want to build. And these are the things that if we can't do these things, and it, well, another way to put it is, we will honor these values to the point of going out of business. So if we can't honor if it's a choice between violating one of our core principles or going out of business, we will go out of business. Like, that's how important those are to us. Yeah, I mean,
has that principle been tested for you as a founder?
Yes. One of the things we really struggle with on a daily basis is, you know, the core thing that we're trying to do as a company at Ultimatum is to empower people to take positive action on social and political issues. Now, the central challenge in that is, what is positive action?
I was gonna ask that. Like, I wrote it down right when you said it.
Yeah, and you know, I don't know that we really have a good answer to that yet, and it's something we're exploring. You know, one thing that we want to do is, you know, turn people's passion for social and political issues into donations to 501c3 nonprofits, and, you know, specifically nonprofits that are having a high impact and helping people, and having an impact on the issues. One of the areas in which we've been really conflicted on is we've actually had political candidates come to us, and some of our advisors come to us and say, we really want you to create an ultimatum campaign for this political candidate or for a political party, or a specific political campaign. And we're just not convinced yet that funneling more money into politics is the right way to solve the problem. I'm not saying it can't be helpful or beneficial in certain circumstances, but, you know, as kind of taken as a whole and at a higher level, we're not sure that that's really going to help solve the problem.
I mean, there's not a lack of money in politics. If we're gonna be
and I guess,
real.
you know, and the question in politics, and maybe this contributes to that, like, the question is, what is good, but what is the good you're trying to solve by contributing to the DNC or the RNC, or like, what is the good? It's a platform.
Yeah.
Like that. Like, I'd be curious. Like, do you? Is that part of the conflict, or is there an answer there?
So that's one. that is one thing that we have struggled with because it's a huge business opportunity, frankly. Because there is so much money in politics, that would be a whole new market for us, and a lot of money is on the table, especially coming into the 2020 presidential campaign. But so far, we've decided to hold off on that. We don't think that funding, at least funding political parties, is going to help solve some of these core issues that we're facing as a country. I'm a little more open to the idea of funding specific political candidates. If a candidate has a very clear platform of, this is what I'm going to do to impact this issue that our customers care about, it may make sense to set up an ultimatum campaign to allow customers to donate to a particular candidate because, they have a track record of success on a particular issue, and that candidate is more likely to take action on that issue once they get into office. So there's like a narrow focus where I think it might work and still fit within our principles of taking positive action.
On the positive action thing, so this is something that really caught my attention when we first talked.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times when people say positive action, they mean you doing the thing that I agree with.
Sure.
And your platform's not about that. You're about enabling people to get behind the causes that they actually care about, whether or not you personally agree with them. Can you talk a little bit about the platform, or maybe even the origin of it? Like, how did you get to a place where you're like, even if you're supporting an idea that I am 100% against, I'm going to enable you to support that cause? Like, that's a big step for most people, I would say.
Yeah. And in fact, we've actually had a number of conversations with folks who wanted us to specifically just focus on left, like liberal issues and ideas. And the very fact that we will run campaigns that are more right-leaning and benefit nonprofits that might be on another side of an issue has been a deal breaker for them. And that's really unfortunate.
Wow.
So the story of how we got started is it was actually my co-founder, Steve's idea. And how he came up with this idea is he would drive by a Planned Parenthood in, I believe it was in San Mateo, California, at least a couple of times a week. And every time he drove by, there would be these protesters outside who were harassing, women going into Planned Parenthood. And it really upset him because he supports Planned Parenthood. He supports, women's health and women's right to choose. So one day he just got fed up and he stopped the car, parked it, and went into Planned Parenthood, donated $20, got a receipt. And then he came out to the protesters and said, because you were here today, I donated $20 to Planned Parenthood. And every day I see you here, harassing women and protesting, I'm going to donate $20 to Planned Parenthood. And it wasn't, like you shouldn't be here. That's not the intent. The intent is I don't have time to stand here and like counter protest or, support women as they're coming into the clinic. So I'm going to directly donate for every day that you're out here. So that was where this idea of if this then donate came from, which is the first feature we built on this platform. So when something happens either in the real world or online, you can make a small or large donation to a 501c3 nonprofit. And that's where Ultimatum came from. So
like, for instance, if disaster, donate to FEMA or something like that.
Yeah. And, we do have some rules set up where we don't, we won't build campaigns around like death tolls or, certain things that are just feel icky and don't feel right. That being said, we will build campaigns. For example, we had a very controversial campaign for balancing two sides of the issue for gun control and rather gun violence. So one side of it was focusing on the mental health aspect, and the other side was focusing on not necessarily restricting access to guns, but looking at what the data says about how we can reduce gun violence and being open to all options. So we ran this campaign, and every time there was a mass shooting, you could donate to one of these nonprofits that supported either the mental health aspect or the gun reform aspect of the issue. And it was interesting. We in that particular campaign, we frankly didn't get a whole lot of traction. And more than anything, we just had people yelling at us because they thought we wanted to take away their guns. They wouldn't even spend the time to understand what we were doing. And, we even tried to engage with them on social media and say, okay, so, you don't think it's a mental health issue. You support your Second Amendment rights and, definitely respect that. But what is the solution? And they would just be like, oh, there is no solution. And, you're just trying to take away my guns. So it, after a while, we just ended the campaign because it wasn't creating positive change. We wanted to try something a little more controversial and try to engage folks and get them talking about the issue in a reasonable, rational way. But apparently that is one issue that we just can't have that conversation yet as a country, which is unfortunate. So, yeah, I mean, to get back to your original question, it is hard for us as founders. We definitely have our own political views and how we feel about specific issues. And it's really hard for us to support to create campaigns that might be on another side of an issue. I think what we try to do is, in like, I can give you kind of a hypothetical example. In the case of like a really hot issue, abortion, we could, have one campaign that supports Planned Parenthood, and then have another campaign that supports a nonprofit that helps single women or women who are raising children on their own without another parent, and or choose to give their children up for adoption. So, you can still do good in the sense of like, despite which side of the issue you fall on. But you can still take a stand and say, I think abortion is okay and it's a woman's right to choose, or you can say, no, the right to life is sacred and that's not okay, and still take, what we're calling quote unquote positive action, in a sense that you're positively impacting the world and making people's lives better.
This kind of goes back to the value of truth. And it's an interesting, as I navigate the thoughts that come into my mind as you talk about these things, the diametrically opposed positions. I mean, abortion is the most divisive topic in our country, right? And it's basically 50-50. And if you started a campaign that said this one's going right to life and this one's going towards Planned Parenthood, you're ultimately raising money for what they would see as opposition and fight. But the reality is Right to Life thinks they're doing good. Planned Parenthood thinks they're doing good. Their truths are their truths. and you're not going to change the other one's mind, but I'm trying to promote my truth. And it's such a fascinating strategy and approach. And I think it's this principle of understanding that other people believe something, that just because you don't believe it, and Rodney has this great diagram, we've posted it, where two people stand on either side of a 6.
Oh yeah.
One person sees a 9, one person sees a 6. Neither of them.
And they're both right.
And they're both right. Like at the exact same time, right? Yeah. Schrodinger's cat, right? Like both truths are there. Why this approach? And like, what is it about your experience, your life, your perception on things like that brought you to say, this is what we need to do?
I think there are a couple of things. One is that the current direction that our country is going, and the divisiveness is not productive. It's not helping us actually solve these problems. And we have a lot of problems. Like oftentimes we can agree that there are problems, we just can't agree on like how to solve them. So this discourse that we're having online in the real world, people yelling at each other because they disagree about something and not truly understanding where that other person is coming from, and not being willing to sit down and talk through an issue, a hard issue. It's our political system is fundamentally broken right now, and it is not helping our country, and it is not helping us come together to solve these problems that we need to solve as a country if we want to survive as the United States of America. So, when Steve came to me with this idea, I was like, that's really interesting. This is one potential way that we might be able to galvanize people, get them, give them a way to actually take action, rather than just scream at another person. So, take positive action, say, here's where I stand on an issue, and here's what I'm going to do about that. And effectively put your money where your mouth is, and, put some money into a nonprofit that is working to make an impact on that issue that you care about. So it's, and frankly, we're not sure this is the actual solution. It is, if this then donate is one feature of our platform. That's how we're looking at it. It's the first one we built because, that was the idea that started the company. That being said, we're starting to see that there might be some other areas and ways that we can motivate and excite people to take real action, and possibly also spur conversations, similar to what you're doing with your podcast. So, we as a company and as a team at Ultimatum, our goal is to explore different ways that we can empower people to take action, and then try and experiment and be willing to fail and realize, well, that just didn't work. Like, we totally fucked that up. Oops. Let's try something else. So, and that's okay. And that's what you have to do as a startup.
I think a lot of what we're trying to do, Keith said it in the run up, like safe spaces. Like, how do we? So, like, you're creating a platform for people to take action,
correct?
And we're creating a platform to teach people how to have dialogue, and to demonstrate it through our podcast. But we're creating another platform to give tangible tools that people can use to actually have the conversation with somebody that they can't see eye to eye with, or they think they can't see eye to eye with.
Sure. Yeah.
And
I think this, we talk about data, right? And this study by moreincommon.com com, like the actual, different More in Common, not the podcast. the different More, the study that they did empirically represents what it is that we fundamentally believe and I think observe. And what the fringes ultimately do, in my opinion, is create this discomfort that I could talk to 10 people about one issue, have 9 conversations that are productive and one that's failed. But I'm so afraid of that one based on the social trolling and you said it. Politics are devastating right now because Democrats and Republicans, that's the life they live. Like, this is the life they live, is politics and yelling and bickering and being dumb about stuff, right? Yeah. And they use that power and that need for power to manipulate everybody else who really doesn't need to deal with the bickering and the knowledge and all that stuff. And so we're manipulated by our politicians and our leaders. We're over inundated with media and influence, and thus we're afraid that if we bring it up, that we're going to be scorned, yelled at, ridiculed. And I just started writing our book, and one of the things that dawned on me is, when Rodney and I started in tech, we used to sit down at lunch and like have these, not he and I, but with some other people, diametrically opposed political conversations. I actually started watching the news at the time, it was before iPhones, because I wanted to contribute to the conversation that they were having at work. But now, like, you kind of are like, so do you want to talk about it? No? Oh, okay. We don't need to. No, let's move on to this. Like, those conversations are just so fraught with uncertainty. And I just see there's such great opportunity to introduce certainty and try to find a way to ignore those wings. And certainly I want to open to a comment from you, Matt, because I just took a little bit of time there. But I do have a question in that. In what you do, because you do work with 501c3s, generally are, in a way, right or left, an activist type of organization. Do you find that your daily reality is surrounded by the fringes in a way, just because of the platform that you've picked or you've developed?
I think we have our customers are, we definitely have some people who are very far left or very far right. I would say the majority of them are somewhere in the middle, and are just happy that we've provided them with some way to take action on these things that they care about. So I think with certain issues, as we've learned the hard way, like with gun violence, on certain issues like gun violence, there's definitely I don't know that we can approach that one yet. It's just too polarizing. But there are a lot of opportunities to find ways to engage people and have them take positive action.
So, like, it seems like the challenge is, it's really easy to watch the news, to read a news story, and to complain about it. It's really, really fucking hard to get off your ass and go do something about it.
Yeah.
Or even click, and then, I'm going to donate money. Like, there's a couple steps versus, I can just, this guy said something, he's a jackass, I can just write on his Facebook wall and tell him what I think about him. And I've changed the world. It seems like
someone on the internet is wrong.
It seems like that's the challenge, like becoming so accessible and so pervasive and easy to use that it's like, I would rather go do that.
Yeah. So what we are trying to do, essentially, I think your question boils down to, UI and UX. So, how
user interface and user experience.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, yes, you need to build something. You need to build features that are things that people want to use and, understand. They have to understand it, and they have to see it as, yes, this is a way I can take action on the thing I care about. but even beyond that, it becomes a UI UX problem of how to make it as easy as possible to log in, make a pledge, and feel like I've taken action. So, that being said, I think we also have recently taken kind of a step back and said, if this then donate really resonates with some people, but a lot of people just don't get it. So, what can we do to what other kinds of features or things can we build on our platform that will empower people to take action? And frankly, and will also allow us to be, eventually be a profitable company and, self-sustaining, because we're not a nonprofit, we are a company. And that was an intentional decision that we made when we started Ultimatum. So yeah, I think a lot of it is just good design. And that's something we definitely are working on and need to improve. But also just talking to your customers and understanding what their needs are and what, how they look at these issues and what they think would be positive action and how to take that action. And then, once we have that, then we can look at, okay, from a technology perspective, how can we make that easier for someone? So, how can we make it easier? Like if they don't have time to show up at a protest, what other options could we give them to express their support, either for or against a particular protest happening? And that's kind of the core idea and what we do and what we are iterating on in order to build the Ultimatum platform.
Keith, I know you have a question. I've just one thought popped up while you were saying that, because UX UI is huge. But then Elon Musk popped in my head talking about when you're trying to sell an electric car, like a new car, into a market that's saturated and people are like they're what's the word, complacent with the options that they have. So they're complacent with complaining about politics on Facebook. You've got to, like, if they're complacent, if their happiness level is at a 5 with the product that they have, you have to be an 8 or a 9 for them to endure the pain or the work it requires to use your thing, even if it's super easy, even if it's a Tesla and it's sexy and it's super nice and I want to drive it. Like to pay that money to go do that, I've got to be this much better than a current option. So that just popped in my head.
Yeah, and I would even add to that, it could cost the same price, be a better thing, but it's going to have to be orders of magnitude better in order for someone to switch. It's this whole idea of switching cost. Because
people hate change.
That's why being first to market with anything is often far more valuable than having the best product.
Exactly. And frankly, that's one of the reasons that, startups, like, it's really important to get something out there, test it, get feedback, iterate. And, because being first to market is great. However, if, you're a company like Ultimatum and you're in this, like, we're essentially trying to define a new market. And that's really, really,
really, you don't really have competition.
Yeah. I mean, we do, but no one is approaching the problem in the way that we are, or they don't even realize that they're sort of solving this problem in what they built. So it's really interesting, and it's frankly hard to explain to investors. I think, anyway, like, we can get into that later if you'd like, but when you're building a platform and building something like this, it is hard to wrap your head around, and we're still doing that ourselves,
Yeah.
So what is it? So there's something you said pre-production time, is that your need to help others and make others' lives better is just a thing you believe. It's not an attachment to a higher power, at least this is, maybe I over inferred certain things, but certainly correct me. It just is something you believe. So comment on that as one. That's how I remember it was, God, it's so long ago, back when I certainly didn't have I was far more passionate in my arguments, but I was dating a girl, and she, we were talking about it, and she asked me why I wanted to volunteer, and I was like, I don't know, it's just the right thing to do, and I want to help the kids over at the Boys and Girls Club. And she's like, oh, so it's in the name of God. Like, she was super religious, and I didn't realize this until this conversation.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, it's just because it's the right thing to do. And she's like, no, so it's in the name of God. And like, years later, I have a very different perspective on that conversation than I probably responded to in the moment. But like, it's hard to explain to somebody, and I'm very curious. Like, I get what you're saying. I just love it. And where does that come from for you? Like, where did you grow up? You grew up in New Mexico. Like, how did that come to fruition for you to bring you where you are?
Wow, that's a big question. So I guess when I grew up in New Mexico, I grew up in a very much a middle to like lower middle class family. My mom is a librarian. My dad was an air traffic controller.
My dad was an air traffic controller.
That's funny.
Oh, by the way, on the note of similarity, if you didn't look at his LinkedIn profile, Rodney, Matt is a Scrum Master. But we're gonna table that conversation for. I'm gonna let you.
I heard him say you used some terms earlier, and I was like, I thought Scrum, but I was like, I'm gonna let it be.
So, anyway,
we love Scrum. Yeah. We love Scrum.
Yeah, we can.
My family scrums.
That's interesting. I'd actually like to hear that.
Hashtag Scrum hard.
Yeah, we can geek out on Scrum later. Grew up in New Mexico and went to public schools in Albuquerque and was around. I essentially I was a white kid, a geek. Very introverted, and
back before it was cool to be a geek. Mm-hmm. Like now it's like trendy, but like back when we were growing up, it was not cool to be a geek.
No,
we got picked on and beat up and like did lunch taken and
yeah, for sure,
all that stuff.
And I just kept playing with computers because I loved it and it was fun. And then it kind of turned into a thing, and now it's my job. So, I had a lot of interesting experiences growing up. I had a lot of friends who, I had some friends who were real well off in Albuquerque, and then I had some friends who were extremely poor. And I had friends from different racial backgrounds, and I think that's what informed this idea that, frankly, a lot of us just got lucky. Like and I realized I was one of those people. Like, despite my, I had a lot of hardships and things that I went through personally as a kid and later as a teenager and in college, and had a lot of things I had to work through. But in the end, I have food on the table. I have a roof over my head. I'm not worried about, are they going to turn off the electricity next month? Are we going to get evicted? Is mom going to get deported? Like, these were all real concerns of, some of my friends growing up. And I think just having that perspective of, I got lucky, and I feel the need to take what I have and apply that in a way that will help other people and improve the lives of other people. I guess I'm not sure, you can ask like the 5 whys, and like in the end, I'm just going to be like, it's like, I guess it's almost like me saying, yeah, because God told me to, but that's not the case.
Well, it's funny you say that, because like listening to you, and then we're listening to Keith's story a second ago, I'm like, it's saying the same thing, just with different words. Like lucky, blessed, because it's the right thing to do, because God told me to do it. Like,
well, I think, I mean, not that I'm a big fan of some of these like atheist philosophers, but I think there is something to just being a good human being. And if you can live a life where, I mean, you can still like enjoy your life, you can have fun, you can make money, and still be a good human being and still help other people. I feel like so many people in our country right now are just focused on themselves, and they're selfish. They just don't give a shit about other people, and it's all about them. And it's about, how do I get ahead and how can I succeed? And if that means pushing someone else down in the process, I'm okay with that. And I absolutely reject that.
It's this, I don't know if it was in 80s or 90s. I think it probably started in the 80s, at the influx of people entering the market and really doing day trading. And then all of a sudden 90s, I always equate the 90s to being like the therapy decade, where everybody started to go to therapy and realize that their parents did them wrong. And then suddenly the messages that we hear,
which is a fact, like all parents mess up.
Yeah, exactly. The messages that we hear are, I don't care what anybody thinks. I don't care what anybody says. And this very self-help, personal being existence
selfies
that I think is is powerful, right, for our personal development. But the messaging around it is to ignore all of those people.
Yeah.
And ignore everything that's it, rather than embrace community and being more of an optimistic, positive community base of surrounding
and like be yourself in that community.
Yeah. It has become this, and thus more and more selfishness. And of course, we can talk about capitalism and its influence on selfishness, but that's a different conversation.
Maybe one day, maybe like the next decade, we'll tie it all together.
Yeah.
Like,
because now you're in this decade of social capitalism, like you had mentioned, and all of these things. And it's like, it's interesting to see where it goes. If you don't mind me asking though.
Sure.
Because you mentioned a couple of things, and we talk about a lot of stuff on our podcast.
Yeah.
You had a lot of hardships and things you had to go through.
Yeah.
With the short time that we have left. Can you dig into that? I'm very curious.
Yeah. So, I'm pretty honest and open about talking about that. As a kid, like I said, I was very introverted, very geeky. Was picked on a lot. And my parents were divorced when I was pretty young. I think I was still in elementary school. And that was really hard on me. There were, home was not always a stable environment. Like, yes, we had a house, like roof over our head, food on the table, but there were definitely issues there. And so, that was really hard as a kid going through that. Let me take a step back. So I think partly because of, genetics or the situation I was in, really I became very deeply depressed as a kid, and didn't really realize this until probably in college. Like, it finally came to a head of like, I am just like, it doesn't matter what I do. like I could be doing the most amazing thing in the world, and like I'm just not enjoying life, and I'm not okay with this. And I literally had to take a year off in college, and I worked full time. Started getting help. Just went to a psychiatrist and a psychologist, and started working through this stuff. And not that like bing, now I'm fixed, like timer's done. It's a constant process, but I think until you become aware of the issues that affect you as a person, and sometimes it's just as simple as like chemicals. Like your chemicals are literally just off balance, but it does play off of your environment too. So it's important to be aware of that. So yeah, I mean, just dealing with like the harassment in school, with my parents getting divorced, with this like ongoing depression and anxiety, and then other things happened with my family, like both my parents remarried, and that is hard. Even if you have the most perfect mixed family, it's still hard. Like all of a sudden you have two new sisters, and you're a kid, and you're like, I have to share a bathroom with these two girls, like, and anyway, yeah, it's, and by the way, I love them. They're great. But we definitely fought as kids. Like, that's what you do with your siblings. Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of things there that, really like, just beat me down as a person. And then because of that, I really grew a lot. And, because I made the conscious decision that I don't want to live my life this way, and I want to be not necessarily a different person, but take a different path. And also, so I guess it's helped me to be more empathetic, when I meet someone who's, come from a background of having some kind of psychological issue, or coming from a family that, had some issues. So yeah, it's made me more empathetic. Also helped me to understand that, I was still born very lucky. Like, and frankly, most people in the U.S. have so much more than everyone else in the world. Like, I'm sorry, we are the 1%. Like, if you live in the U.S., you are the 1% of the rest of the world. I mean, maybe it's not 1%, but it's like 5%. So that always pisses off my very
7.4 billion people on the planet. There are only 350 million in the United States, and the vast majority of not the vast majority, it's certainly but much of the world lives in poverty.
Yeah.
You mentioned a word, resilience, again, pre-production, and you used it in reference to talking to young folks about going through hardship, but then also building a business and like going through failures and continuing through. What is that like? You use the word resilience, so I'm curious as to why and like what it means for you.
Yeah, so resilience is to me, being faced with, potentially numerous challenges, oftentimes multiple challenges all at once, which is a whole lot of fun. I'm sure we've all been there. And being able to you're going to have maybe sometimes it's even a day or two of just kind of freaking out. Like, what am I going to do? Like, I'm losing my job, or
who am I?
Yeah. I mean, whatever the issue is or the challenge. And that's okay. It's okay to feel that way and to like kind of have your moment of freak out and be like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life or how I'm going to get through this. But then, developing the awareness of where you are at personally, and how you're feeling, why you're feeling that way. And then being able to sort of abstract that away, like abstract the, your emotions and your feelings and your background and why you're feeling a certain way from what's actually going on in your life, and then analyzing what's going on in a more rational way and say, okay, here's what's actually happening. And frankly, it's probably not the end of the world, unless it's literally the end of the world, but probably not. And just working through it one step at a time and saying, okay, challenge 1 has 5 parts, and just going through one by one and saying, here's how I'm going to solve each of those 5 parts. And it's really hard to do, especially when multiple things hit at the same time. Mm-hmm. But it's just something you have to. It takes a lot of work, but you have to understand yourself. You have to be able to be objective about what's actually going on external to you, and then work through the problem in a rational, methodical way. And I think the resilience part comes from practice, from doing this multiple times. And part of this is just, age. And, once you get out there in the world after college and you start working and you start having, some different experiences, that's when you're going to get beat down multiple times. You're going to be told you're worthless, that what you're working on is not going to lead anywhere. And it could be your parents, it could be an investor, it could be even a partner sometimes, and that's awful, but that does happen. And you just got to keep going, and you got to work through it, and have a process, and be ready to meet those challenges. And do it over and over and over again. It's really hard, but anything that you want to do that has a real impact and is something you're passionate about is going to be really, really, really hard. These stories you read about Mark Zuckerberg or other people who've started these amazing companies, and it seems like it just fell on their lap. It's like, well, there's a lot of luck there, but that is like the vast majority of companies and people just struggle to get where they want to go. And the media just skips all that over and says, it's easy. You just do a thing, you build a company, and you'll make billions of dollars. And it's like, no, that's not how.
And even then, Zuckerberg still had to put in a ton of time, hours, and effort to make what was, especially pre-public days when, it was only for universities, and you had to go to university after university and build the partnerships and, whatever it was, right? So there was a lot there.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I'm inclined, Matt, to just close on all of those thoughts.
Sure.
But in fairness to the process, we always ask our guests. And Rodney always asks our guests.
I always ask if you. Oh, that was a cue. I get it. If
staring off, like, oh.
if there's one thing you would leave everybody listening with, what would that one thing be?
Oh Lord, I don't know. I hate answering these kinds of questions because I just feel like, I know better than you, so go do this. And I don't, that just turns me off. What one thing would I leave you with?
Interesting.
Oh, that's hard because I guess I'll say a couple things. Just be a good person. Follow whatever you're passionate about. Do whatever you're passionate about. Work hard. Be empathetic. Listen to other people. Remember that everyone struggles, and you struggle and other people struggle, and that's okay. And just understand where people are coming from. And try to have conversations, which, is really awesome about your podcast. Like, just have a conversation with someone. If you're one of the wacky lefty liberals, go find a Trump supporter and sit down and like, buy him coffee, him or her, buy him a beer, like, and just talk. And same, with the right. And, I think you'll find that we're all just people and we all suffer in our own unique ways and we express that in different ways. And, I think that would help a lot with the direction our country is going.